I'm with you here on the Newsfeed PM, and thanks for staying on. US President Donald Trump's trade tariffs have been labeled as illegal. Critics say the tariffs are outside the legal framework of international trade law. South Africa is one of the many countries that have been slapped with a heavy percentage in these taxes. Joining us now is Mmiselo Qumba, lecturer at the University of Pretoria and an admitted attorney of the High Court of South Africa. Good to have you, sir, and thank you very much for your time. The position, I suppose, taken by South Africa, including President Cyril Ramaphosa, is that we're going to negotiate ourselves. So they're not playing hardball to say, oh, these tariffs are illegal and whatnot and whatnot. Their position is we can still find common ground here in these talks. Are they correct in that approach, or should they go the legal route and tell Donald Trump, no, these things are illegal?
That's not, I think my position in discussing the Trump's issue is to say one of the approaches to make ultimately the United States of America to account for its violation of international trade law is if they are able to bring the United States of America to the WTO dispute settlement system. It is not to the exclusion of the other solutions. What has been going on is the long wait of period of waiting for a lot of these talks, which are not clear. Obviously, they're probably not publicly available exactly what they are talking about in internal negotiations. But what we are now what we're now seeing is that, as a matter of fact, we've been hit with a 30% tariff, and that is the fact. And one of the alternative routes, which I justify in my academic writing, is to have Trump being taken to the WTO dispute settlement system for violating international trade law rules.
Yeah. Now, some publications reporting, for example, in the United States, that there are some 200 Democratic lawmakers who have filed a legal brief supporting a lawsuit against the Trump administration use of emergency powers to impose tariffs. Is that the kind of route that one would need to take at the WTO?
The kind of route that one would have to take is a different one. It's the one where the member state takes another member state to the WTO system, the World Trade Organization system of settling dispute, rather than a domestic legal setting context that you are referring to.
Yeah.
So it's the, yes.
Yeah, and how would you fight this specifically if you're South Africa? What are the key issues that you would raise?
The key issues that you raise would be the issues of violation of fundamental principles of international trade law, basic international trade law principles like the principle of non-discrimination, so which is a foundational principle. So it's a blatant violation of those principles, which means the system means that you cannot discriminate between the member countries in the concession that you make from one country to the other. You are not allowed to discriminate. The same system, you cannot impose a restriction on one country and exclude the others. The other way of looking at it is to say you cannot you cannot have different unilaterally take a position changing the entire structure of the WTO system and making you're now having a lawmaking function which has previously been dedicated to the World Trade Organization as a system of lawmaking system and the whole system. Yes.
Why would a body like the EU, for example, not opt for that particular route, but opt for some kind of negotiated settlement? It's not only the EU, I suppose. It's 50 other countries or so that have been slapped with these tariffs. None of them are pursuing that particular law or that principle based on the WTO, but rather opting for a negotiated settlement.
The point is this, that the negotiated settlement is taking these countries in a different direction than we know. It's fundamentally eroding the international trade law system in this way. If you are going to have a country that is run by a particular president, in this instance, Donald Trump, who says that trading system is not favoring America, therefore they must now move away from it. There has been, remember, this is not the first assault of the international trade law system that we have. The first one was when the United States, under the same president, Donald Trump, who blocked the appointment of judges to the WTO. And the main complaints about the United States, if you look at from the perspective of the US, is this. The first one is that the WTO negotiations are taking too long. So there's prolonged negotiations in reaching agreements. The second is that there is an issue of a judicial overreach by the WTO judgments. In the case of saying, for instance, you have a WTO system that would decide the national security issue of the United States, and according to the United States, that's the overreach that should be the reserve of the domestic courts in the United States, or they should find the ways of protecting themselves. But doing that, taking a unilateral action outside the negotiated agreements, the rules of the game, is to say we are moving out, and one wonders what will remain after the Trump administration. You see, the key problem there is this. The problem is that we have a president who is eroding the structure of the WTO as a whole. And the term of each president ends at some point. When the term ends, what will happen? What will remain of the WTO trading system? And the other problem that we are going to have is the inspiration that is going to be drawn by other leaders of these countries to impose their own tariffs. So the tariff, the US administration has been a source of, potentially a source of global economic instability that is awaiting us because of the consequences that can come out of that. Yeah. So I am saying, in addition to the negotiations that is now taking place, the other route would be to go to the WTO dispute settlement system, because the system allows parties to negotiate. The negotiation at the WTO system allows parties to negotiate. The best part of that is a neutral ground. It's not like you are invited to a White House to be ambushed by a president or who's not even willing to negotiate with you. So you have a situation where you have a platform for negotiation. Yeah. And the product of that negotiation is a fair discussion on how these tariffs should go about. The second step would be to have a panel discussion discussing the legality of this tariff system. The reason the United States is taking this posture is because the developed countries under the trading law system, they have had tariff commitments, what is called the bound tariffs, that are about 3 to 6% of those tariffs now, which have now been escalated to 30% in countries like South Africa. But if you look at that from the American perspective, if you take a numerical approach, which is problematic on its own, if you take a numerical approach, then that looks unfair on the position of the United States. But the development of the country, but the United States is bound itself to rules like that, and it has to abide by the rules like that. So the point I'm trying to make, I think the main gist of the thesis, the main thesis of my argument is to say, in order to preserve the international trading law, in other words, the international rule of law, would have to have some form of accountability for actions that are clearly unlawful and illegal. Yeah. That is, actions that are falling outside the framework of the WTO system, or in other words, WTO law.
Now, here's the challenge that is being cited here, is that China, for example, would have lodged a complaint with the WTO after Trump administration slapped them with an additional 10% levy on all goods from Asia to the United States. However, that particular legal challenge is before the body and currently is not leading anywhere because this WTO's appellate body has been non-functional for years.
China has already lodged the complaint surrounding the very same issue. So what I'm saying is that instead of negotiating at the wrong ground, the first point would be to negotiate at the neutral place where we will look at the rules. Remember, when I made an example about the trade law tariffs that the United States has bound itself to, the ones that they are now violating, to say they are moving higher tariffs compared to the 3 to 6% that they are now bound by under the current trading rules. If Trump administration feels that those bound concessions are unfair to them, the best place to negotiate the fairness or unfairness of tariffs is the promotion of the trading law system And that is the best place is to adopt a mechanism that will allow for the negotiations of a negotiated settlement of some sort, rather than pick and choose a unilateral approach that the United States has taken. The question about the WTO, China, Canada, and about 22 other countries have gone to the WTO currently. I'm saying this is a mechanism that can provide another alternative solution to indicate that countries should not be taken for granted by Donald Trump, who, for reasons unconnected to trade law, decide to impose tariffs the way he wants. We can't have a world like this. This is a very chaotic environment that we find ourselves in.
But of course, the challenge there is that, I mean, Trump himself has broken that particular system. So he had blocked the appointment of 2 judges to the court in 2019, and it has been stuck in limbo since then. The Biden administration did not reverse that, and that's where we are sitting right now. So it's almost that suggestion that you're saying we should go there. That particular body has got no teeth. One could even say it does not really exist at this particular point, and cannot make any legally binding rulings against the United States.
That's exactly the point. To say that the South Africa must contribute to the development and revitalization of the system, because the result of not having the system is that the consequences are much more harsher than what we now have. We are not going to have a predictable legal system. We are not going to have we are going to have a chaotic environment that is undesirable for any country, including the United States. So when I'm not saying that the WTO system is functioning perfectly. All I'm saying is, it is one of the mechanisms that can be used to make sure that there's some form of accountability, or there's some room for negotiation, or that Donald Trump or the Trump administration must be clear that they are now withdrawing altogether from the system. The best way to make that stance would be to make sure that he is able to go to the WTO and some form of accountability exists. Because as we speak now, you can't tell me now, what certainty are we having? Where are we going? Everyone is accounting to Donald Trump and is being called to account, and there's no tangible results that are coming now. So we are both in both situations. There seems to not, if we take your argument, both situations don't produce immediate practical results. But in the long term, the commitment by a country like South Africa to the international rule of law would be shown that we're not just acting for the mere immediate benefit. We are acting for the sustainability of the trading system that has been working for the years that it has been working. And if any state has a problem, the room for negotiation can only be at the rightful place to negotiate. That's the point I am trying to make.
Mmiselo, I get your point loud and clear. Much appreciated. Thank you so much for coming on. That's Mmiselo Qumba, lecturer at the University of Pretoria and admitted attorney at the High Court of South Africa.